Okay, perfect. For all members who are attending the conference, I will kindly ask you to take a seat, please. First of all, thank you all so much for being here. It's such a pleasure and such a privilege to have all of you here to attend this conference, this book launch. We hope to come out with a lot from this conference, and we'll have a report about some of the conclusions that were made. But before that, I'd like to just give an initial message to thank you on behalf of the UO and UNESCO Crossings Institute. So, mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, dames en heren, panita panove, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to our book launch for Professor Peter Laufer's volume of Don't Shoot the Journalists, Migrating to Stay Alive. My name is Zachary Jones-Naray, and as a research fellow at the Crossings Institute of Conflict-Sensitive Reporting and Intercultural Dialogue, to firstly thank our partners, Ukrainian Voices Refugee Committee, for their continued support, and of course, for hosting this conference. All of you are invited to the Willamette Valley for one of our own conferences, so we're looking forward to seeing you there. I'd also like to thank the representatives from Journalistic Voices Diversified, RFG Media, Migra Voice, Media Diversity Institute, and all who have made today possible, and especially Federica for all of her continued support. Before we begin, I thought I should give a quick rundown of the structure of this panel. First of all, we'll start off with a conversation about the book that we've published. Some of our brilliant authors and directors and research fellows are here, such as Professor Christopher Chavez and Professor Peter Laufer. And then we'll discuss the experiences of the exiled reporters and journalists that we have the pleasure of welcoming here. Amongst them, we have Ahmad Zaida Tunvos, Lailuma Sadid, Mostafa Darwish, and Luke Steinberg, who will be joining us as part of a larger panel in regards to the representation of exiled journalists and the narrative that we are continuing to explore through this book and the conferences that we'll be attending. Followed by a short intermission, which I think now will be even shorter due to the delay that we've had, but we'll figure something out. We'll recommence at around 3:10 for a larger conference. We, of course, encourage questions, conversations, so if one of you has a question, please let us know and we'll provide a microphone and we'll take it from there. But before then, I think we'll talk about the book. So I'll take a seat. Peter, do you want to introduce us and how this book came to be? And
I can do that, but one of the things I thought, and this was the idea of my two colleagues here, we have in the book a poem in each chapter that comes from our poet laureate in the state of Oregon, Kim Stafford. And the first poem sets the scene. Is this not hot?
I'll take this.
This first poem sets the scene. This first poem by Kim Stafford sets the scene of what we've tried to establish with this book. The book is an anthology, and each chapter is written by someone who has experience as a journalist in exile or someone who is working with journalists in exile to try to help compensate for the stresses of being forced to go elsewhere. And that's what the poem really speaks to in an introductory manner. You are reporter, stringer, correspondent. Secrets are your sources. You give it straight, be it good or grim. You make bright sun shine into the labyrinth. You light our path from impasse. Give clarity to our confusion. You can report, release, reveal. You can disturb, surprise, astound. Sometimes you carry words like thorns that cut your hands. You carry red-hot iron that smokes. You freight news that bends your back. Heavy treasure we would be poor without. You deliver dispatch from danger, story from struggle, insight for our ignorance. Your pack spills facts, numbers, photographs to pry aside our prejudice, put down our fears, educate our opinions, challenge our denials. You bring stories from strangers, voices from victims. You replace fictions with facts, rumors with reports. You feed our future. You slack our thirst for honor. Reporting live, you do the deep dive to keep the truth alive. Messenger with mojo, you put yourself in danger so that we may all thrive. And that's a sense of what the poet Kim Stafford brings to the book and connects the chapters that speak to exile for survival and the power of the press. And it is that very power of the press that forces so many reporters to have to, especially in the contemporary era, exile to survive. But we also must remember, I think, that this is not something new, and it's always the messenger who is in jeopardy because there are those who do not want the message to survive. So with that, we would like to thank you all for being here and to introduce some aspects of the book with photographs. Each chapter in the book begins with a photograph, and we have a couple of representative photographs here to give you a sense of what's in the book. I'll speak to them, as will my colleagues, and then we look forward to a conversation with you. So this book comes out of a conference that we held 1 year ago at the University of Oregon in the Willamette Valley in the Pacific Northwest. And as our colleague said, you're all invited to come visit and to drink our fine Pinot Noir and eat our wild salmon. And this was at the conference. This is the author of one of the chapters, and she wrote a book that deals with the horrors of journalistic practice in Mexico. Until the recent events in Gaza and in Ukraine, Mexico was year after year the most dangerous place in the world for journalists based on numbers of casualties. Now the three locales are co-equals, and these are students of ours at the University of Oregon gathered around her, Kathy Cochran, after she spoke about the chapter she wrote, which is in the book. And I should emphasize that the books are on the back table. They are not for sale. They are for you. We encourage you to take a book as you proceed. And we have another here image, which I'll speak to, which is an example of what we try to do in the book and show that this is a universal problem. And this is the very recent, as you can see by the end date there, gravestone for a reporter in Las Vegas. And he had uncovered a low-level government employee's misdeeds. And for that, he was ambushed as he went into his home in Las Vegas and murdered. And you can see here at the close, after always in our hearts, the sign that's used universally in America to show the end of a dispatch, 30 meaning the end of a dispatch. Would you like to speak to Cayman's picture here, or would you like me to? Then the next one can be from Professor Chavez. This is another photograph that we want to indicate that what is going on globally also goes on in the United States. Often we fear that those of us who are from America act as if we are removed and don't have the problems of the rest of the world. Well, of course, since January 20th and the current Trump administration, everyone knows that we have the problems of the world. But this dates, as you can tell, perhaps by the costuming of the assailants, from the early 60s. And on the ground is a reporter from Chicago, a radio reporter, and he is being pummeled by these Ku Klux Klansmen who are beating him because he is reporting on Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement for voter registration in rural Mississippi at the time. That's his tape recorder, an old 5-inch reel-to-reel Ewer or Nagra on the ground there. But what is perhaps the most poignant part of this photograph is the fellow that you see lounging against this old Ford sedan with his pipe, watching contentedly, and the man there in the sports jacket is the county sheriff. And that gives an indication, a visual indication of the kind of problem that existed at that time, and it exists today in our country when the current resident of the White House refers to journalists as the enemies of the people, not just once, but continuously. Your turn.
Yeah, there were two events that really happened that shaped the book. I think the first one was this 3-day symposium that occurred last April. The purpose of the symposium was to really elevate the voices of journalists in exile. And so our role was really to facilitate some of these conversations. And so the way the book is structured is really written from the voice of these journalists that are experiencing it, or facilitated conversations. And our role was to get out of the way as much as possible, but allow these folks to speak for themselves. And then about a month and a half later, there was World Press Freedom Day in Santiago, Chile, where it covers very similar kinds of themes of freedom to threat globally. It's a very sobering experience to have that amount of content and things to process. You know, one, to understand that this is a global phenomenon. There are shared experiences across journalists from different places, threats of violence, threats of bankruptcy, assaults by the court, assaults by state actors, non-state actors. These things seem to be universal and, as Peter mentioned, historical, right? They're nothing particularly new. I think what is also is that in some ways these events were inspiring, and Zach's going to talk to us toward the end about the kinds of strategies and coalition building that's occurring precisely because of this moment, that people aren't necessarily passive agents in this whole process, but are really being actively involved in building these coalitions to fight some of these efforts, right, and to draw attention to it. So we're happy to be able to do that to some degree.
Thank you. And to speak on what Professor Chavez was talking about World Press Freedom Day, this is an institute that's been reporting on World Press Freedom Day. We are a Category 2 institute under UNESCO. And we've had the pleasure of reporting around the world with a variety of cohorts. And we have the pleasure of having our cohort here, some of the brightest students from the University of Oregon. So it's a real pleasure to have people from Oregon here to report, and that kind of symbolizes the intent of this institute. It's to emerge and immerse our students directly into the field of reporting and to be able to carry a message back home and to hopefully provide a degree of clarity and context to the ways in which press freedoms are being continuously attacked. This is an example of us last year, actually, almost a year to this day, which is when we had the privilege of being invited to the Palestinian embassy in Chile, Santiago. This is us in the backyard commemorating the Guillermo Cano Award, which was given to Nasser Abu Bakr, the president of the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate. At the time of our conversation, he had lost 83 of his colleagues to the conflict, many of whom were friends and family members. That number has only risen. And the history of Chile itself reveals something that I think is emblematic of this institute, which is trying to uncover not only the current history and context of press freedoms, but the legacy at which has created this situation, which is why we show you pictures from the 60s from one of our authors, Jeff Kamen. This picture right here is myself interviewing Vera Baboon, the ambassador to Chile for Palestine. She's the first mayor of Bethlehem, and she's been in Santiago for the past 3 years now after fleeing from the conflict. She still hasn't seen her family for many years, and actually she lost her husband in 2007, who was in captivity as a prisoner for his political affiliations in the West Bank. Now, some of you might be wondering why there is an embassy in Chile and why there is such a legacy of Palestinian support. That actually comes back to the mid-18th century, in which we had large waves of Palestinian immigrants move to Chile and establish a really affluent and unique immigrant community and identity within Chileans' history and political identity. 50,000 or so identifying Chilistinians live in Santiago and the surrounding areas. And so through a conversation, which happened to time itself in the middle of the chaos of the encampment protests that were taking place on our own campus, we were able to interview Vera Baboon and Nasser Abu Bakr in the background of this inauguration, this ceremony at the Palestinian embassy. One of the many realities that we've had to face since then is that as much as we are messengers, journalists, and reporters, we have an extreme privilege that comes with our position, with our institute, and also who we are as human beings. And the fact is that the fact that we are being sent over to report on these stories reflects a larger theme of not being able to necessarily give the platform to exiled reporters directly. That's the current situation that we're facing. And one of the things that we've encountered is that as we produce this story, which provides a very unique angle on the conflict, one that often, from our experience, tends to be characterized by the refugees or the terrorists. We were able to speak to a delegate. That story didn't run on any major news network. That's a reflection, I think, of the environment we're living in which we are trying to tell a story, someone's background. And to give you an idea of her story specifically, there's a segment that I'll never forget in which she's discussing the IDF raiding her family's business. They broke into her home. She had actually just had to clean the rubble from a former bombing beforehand. And as they were putting her husband in handcuffs, her children came out, and she said to the IDF soldiers, give me a second, I need to put them back to sleep. I don't want them to see you, and to change their idea of how they view Israelis. And so you can imagine the degree of restraint that someone would have to go through to make sure that her children, when growing up, will be able to have a more peaceful relationship and not be scarred and traumatized from this first interaction. That story, amongst many others, continues to affect how I view my work and the role of this, but we hope that one day stories like these can hopefully find a larger audience, and for this reason, it's influenced so much of this book and so much more that will come out of this conference.
Yeah, and I'd love to add to that a bit. So I had the opportunity to bear witness to this very thoughtful interview that was probably over the course of an hour, just a really thoughtful discussion on this. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences just sort of shopping this around? Because it was not a thing that at least news organizations in the US were particularly interested in, providing that counter-narrative, which is really important for independent journalism, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had the pleasure of being the director of my radio news station, which is a big title for saying that we played for 30 minutes, you know, a news episode every Monday, which isn't saying much. But at the time, there was this feeling of deep, a desire to get this story out in whatever way possible. We produced two audio stories that gave a timeline of the encampments. We interviewed NYU students who had their tents bulldozed over by NYPD. We even interviewed Israeli students to discuss their experience and really tried to encapsulate many of the tenets of journalism that are taught at the University of Oregon, which is not to necessarily offer both perspectives in equal measure and respect, but be able to provide a narrative that can offer you a different angle and enough information so that you can be educated, and not only that, hopefully become an agent of change, which is, I think, an element of the industry that we're witnessing that we need to take into account, which is that we're no longer reporting, we're no longer the witnesses. We need to inform people to allow them to become effective citizens, because at this point, as we've experienced as an American institute, it's relying on not just the institutes or the governments, but on everyday citizens to become more informed and more aware of their role in the decay, I would say, of the current industry that we are living in. So that story didn't go through any other media service aside from KWVA, the local radio station. The only reason that happened is because I was director of the news department at the time. And this story was pitched to a variety of national and international news organizations. And there was an iron wall. That was really what it felt like. And so I think we continue to inspire ourselves, but that was an interaction that for my few years being in the field was a awakening moment, I guess, in the reality of what it's like to be reporting these stories.
Do we have another slide here?
Yeah, we can do the slide.
Okay. Here we have an image from Latin America, and my colleague Chris Chavez will talk about the chapter he wrote in the book that deals primarily with the global South as it's expressed in Latin America. But this is moments after the staff of the newspaper in Buenos Aires, the staff of the newspaper El Tiempo, returned to their newsroom after it was sacked. It's an example of how, as ghastly attacks on the journalists themselves are rampant globally, so are attacks on the infrastructure. And here, the newsroom of El Tiempo was ransacked. The computers were destroyed, and the telephone connections were disabled by toughs who were enabled by the government in charge at the time. And since the period of Pinochet and the other Southern Cone military dictatorships that operated with impunity because they were in charge, killing people, now in the current era, we see this kind of activity that silences, de facto silences, because either the infrastructure is destroyed or there are other elements of journalism that are suffocated, and prevent word from getting out. And that's what you can speak about regarding the rest of the region, please.
Yeah, one of my roles at the University of Oregon is I'm the director of the Center for Latino Latin American Studies. We're an interdisciplinary research center that focuses on kind of a hemispheric approach. And so I had an opportunity to host a panel with the Edward R. Murrow Fellows that were coming across from various countries, so Uruguay, Ecuador, Guatemala, Venezuela. And part of the chapter really kind of tries to complicate this idea of Latin America as a concept, both as spaces of erasure, but also spaces of solidarity. And so in terms of spaces of erasure, just really becoming attuned to the fact that, yes, they're all journalists in exile, but they're facing very, very different issues depending on what their political context is in the home country, the degree of stability, the degree of economic stability. And so a place like Ecuador, which is facing, very much state violence, physical assassination of politicians, assassination of journalists, is a very different context than, say, Uruguay, in which it's much more of an economic and judicial attack on journalists. So they're both being attacked, and the result is silencing, but they're very, very different kinds of context. So again, just reclaiming some of those differences that exist within Latin America, but at the same time, knowing that there are spaces of solidarity, that concept of Latin America allows different countries that are Spanish-speaking, that fall within that rubric, to create coalitions with one another, including the Instituto de Prensa y Sociedad, which is one of those kind of cross-cultural and national collaborations. So thinking of it in those kinds of both ways. In the book, Latin America does play a prominent role, largely because of who we invited, but partly because of what's going on there. So Javier is from Argentina. We also had submissions from Mexico, in addition to other countries throughout Latin America.
So here's one of our colleagues, Professor Damien Radcliffe, who's unable to make today's conference. We miss him dearly, but this is one of the reports that he came out with, which will paint a larger picture of the future of journalism, at least the one that we're hoping will be actualized. And so this is on the eve of World Press Freedom Day, UNESCO's annual event celebrating press freedoms. The theme of this year is AI, and so that tends to be a rather ominous term within our field. I think for too long we've decided to not pay attention to it. Well, unfortunately, as many of you know, AI is the word of the year for many reasons. Professor Radcliffe produced a report recently looking at the ways in which AI and press freedoms can work together. We also have some projects that have been inspired by this conference that are taking place that I'll talk a little bit more of afterwards. But here's some information regarding the current situation that has been approved by the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is an association that we've worked with in the past. But in the past year, over 70 journalists have been killed, and then especially discussing the forms of censorship that exiled journalists go through and other reporters as well. We have an idea, if you will, a strategy, a game plan for hopefully how we can progress as an industry and as reporters, which I'll get to afterwards. But before, I'd like to know, how do both of you look at AI as an element that we cannot escape in our world and in our profession?
I ignore it and escape it in our profession and look to the human side as much as I can while appreciating all of the external influences such as AI, which brings me to one poem to close this relatively formal aspect of our presentation and our launching of the book, and reminding you all to please take a copy of the book if you're interested. They're on the back table there. But again, from our poet laureate, Kim Stafford, in direct response to any concern about AI, and I'm going to change poems because it works better to your prompt. So talk a moment, my colleague, while I flip to the right page.
The way that we've been talking about AI, I think here is as a tool, to help better journalism or better writing. Or in what cases does it replace the writing concept? I think for now, we're still trying to teach students to think critically, to articulate their ideas, to organize them, and to write, and then, if possible, to use AI, but I think still kind of a work in progress. I mean, how are you using it in the work that you're doing?
So, in anticipation of this conference and of World Press Freedom Day, I've been working alongside a variety of professors from the University of Oregon, alongside our dear faculty here and colleagues, to create an app that will essentially feature exiled reporters, refugee journalism, storytelling, and a variety of other platforms that tend to not be either published or credited, like I spoke about before, my story in the embassy, and to feature essentially exiled reporters' stories from across the world and directly tie them to the events of today. Because the reality is that with the rise of authoritarian governments and anti-immigration policies that seem to be sweeping across the globe, the rate and number of exiled reporters and refugees in general will only be rising. And so being able to include their narratives and to give them the agency to tell their story in a way that is respectful and gives them the power is something that we've been looking into, because yet again, we tend to be in this position due to a degree of privilege and academic background, which ties into our final game plan. This app essentially would not only feature stories from exiled reporters and refugee journalists, it would also train via an AI module in solutions journalism, one that was developed by another colleague of ours at the University of Oregon, to train young refugees and exiled and displaced individuals to become their own journalists, which is something that we've been discussing as an institute, which is that if any of you have a phone, all of you can become a journalist. All of you can have your work published. Now, the training that allows you to understand the ethics behind that is something that we're currently developing. But we believe that in order to truly, allow journalism to survive, the doors that would allow people to get to that degree of sorts should be open on a global level and a digital level, and have AI hand in hand with that.
And so to respond to your query, this poem from our poet laureate Kim Stafford, titled "This Conversation May Be Recorded for Quality Assurance." I'm glad somebody cares when I call customer service to ask about my last billing cycle and get a woman in India with a lovely accent, her voice freighted by satellite, to sort my payment. How can I help you? And after we delve into enigma, beyond our conversation, somewhere later, far away, someone else prepares to listen for quality assurance, perhaps a mother in North Carolina trying to make ends meet, or an immigrant in Chicago moonlighting to send money home. Think of it, we send our voices to mingle out there. Beyond this great emptiness, speaking our oldest human contract. Can I help? And then, alert to the timbre of a human voice, someone attends to how certain syllables may assure the quality of our essential bond. So thank you all for being here and for celebrating the publication of this book, of which we are so proud and can be proud because we did not write it. It's written by those who are living it, and that, we think, is extraordinarily important.
Thank you. And before we end that, I would like to finish this note with a relatively simplified game plan, which of course has a lot more information behind it, but something to kind of portray and kind of illustrate the context that we're discussing, which is there's a lack of funding for journalism on a global level. I would love to hear more about what you have to say in regards to that as well. But of course, something that we spoke about with the inclusion of AI is global training, being capable of training students and future journalists and reporters, and really at the end of the day, truth seekers across the world, allowing them to also understand what are the implications of telling their own story, whether that's giving them access to private data, which is a huge issue in our field, or allowing them to have mental health resources, because something that we also want to discuss is the profound trauma of being someone that has to both tell the story of your own experiences, but of course with that represent a population and a people and a community that may not have to. That's something that we do not truly have the ability to understand or empathize with in our position, but that's something that is an absolute reality for many people who are taking the position of being exiled reporters. And then lastly, collaboration. Conferences like these, being able to collaborate with institutions from across the world, 6,000 miles away. Unfortunately, we are an American institute, which means that in the current situation, we have more liberties discussing the political situation of journalism and press freedoms with members of the commission than we would with our own government system. So that in lies the reflection of the current world we live in, and the fact that we must start collaborating now. We don't really have much time, in my opinion, and so once again, it's an honor to be able to sit here and discuss this and have so many different members from all the media organizations and representations that we've invited here today. I hope that this is the beginning of a new way of working and seeking the truth. And if any of you did not get a book for some reason and would rather order it through Anthem Press, which we've had issues with UPS, so just for those who are looking into that, it might cause a couple of delays, but we are lucky enough to get them here today. If you wish to use this QR code to order yourself your own copy, we also have some behind, but I thought I should share that now. We'll have a short break of about 5 minutes, and then we're going to regroup with a panel of exiled reporters, and then we'll have media representatives join them afterwards, and then we'll conclude the seminar panel at 3. Perfect. Hello, hello.
Perfect.
Thank you, thank you. I hope everyone was able to serve themselves some tea, coffee, some snacks. I can also smell some borscht from the kitchen, which I don't think is available to the public, but smells delicious either way. So for today, we have an amazing panel of exiled journalists and writers and photojournalists who have, come to join us here. First, we have, sorry, Ahmad Gizadbi, thank you, and then Lailuma Sadid and Mustafa Darwish, who have all joined us today for this amazing conference. These are, of course, some of our stellar students from the cohort. We have Ellie Johnson and James Lejeune, who will be joining us as the panel conversation journalists as well, who will be discussing with you about your work, specifically discussing your experiences, your journey to Belgium, and some of the things that we can learn and insights from your experiences being in the field. And for that, I will promptly leave the stage and let you guys start the conversation.
All right, as my colleague Zach said, my name is James Lejeune. This is my colleague Ellie Johnson. We are third-year journalist students at the University of Oregon, and we are proud fellows of the Crossings UNESCO cohort. We have some questions for you guys. We would like you to maybe just go down the line and each give your response as we ask them. First up, how has the state of press freedom in 2025 influenced your work?
Thank you so much, first of all. Just I want to introduce myself, if I can, because people maybe don't know me. So my name is Ahmad Gamal Ziada. I'm investigative journalist. I'm Egyptian. And second, I want to say why I'm here in Belgium, and then because it's very general questions. So when I was in Egypt, I was working as an investigative journalist, and I went to jail twice for my work. And actually, once I came here, it was just for advocacy with the EU about freedom of press. And I found out that if I come back to Egypt, I will go to jail again because I had an investigation about the situation of jails in Egypt. And it was so difficult to come back, so I decided to stay in Belgium. And we started a project, which is a platform, investigative platform, called Zawiya 3. And actually, once we started this project, the police in Egypt arrested my father in order to stop this project. And then, thanks God, we wanted for advocacy with the UN and with the EU and even with the United States, and we went him out, and the project continues. And what I want to say here in 2025, Egypt blocked our website because we are writing about corruption, about human rights, about economic, about politics, and they blocked us twice. Why I'm saying that and why I'm saying this introduction, in order to say how the situation of freedom of press in Egypt, how it works in our area, and why we are, as journalists, cannot work in our country. For example, now, our platform is legally Belgian platform, but reality, we have 27 journalists inside Egypt. It's impossible to mention all of their names in our platform because, when you just write about politics and army and the economy of Egypt, it's like they will go to jail. It's so easy to do that. So that's the situation in our area, especially when you are working investigative platform. But thanks God, it's really good. We still have some free countries. Not all of them is still free. Like, for example, the United States now, I'm not sure if it's still free like before. We had fund from NED, which is American organization. They stopped our funding after these elections, but the situation in general, it's not that good for us as journalists.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Let me start by thanking the organizers and also the Voice of Ukrainian and also the other partners. Shortly, I will introduce myself, but I will answer your question if I can. I'm from Afghanistan, and I have an experience of journalism more than 19 or 18 years. So I was a student in the first time that the Taliban took power in Afghanistan, and like today, they closed everything for women. I created a secret class for the girls in my house, but unfortunately, 2 times I was beaten by Taliban. From that time, I was very, very young. I decided to stand for our right. I mean, for the right of women. And since that, I'm working for the rights of women. For the moment, doesn't matter in Afghanistan, but when I came in Belgium, when I see discrimination and also some inequality, I say that my fight is for all women. I started working as a journalist in 2003 in Afghanistan after the shoot of the Taliban, and I was the first female journalist on 2003 to appear in the television without any skirt. That on that time it was really so difficult to appear in television without a scarf, I mean the wheel. I received death threats, but I never gave up. I say that this is my way and that I need to work on that. Finally, continue as a journalist to work, and then it's 12 years ago that I came to Belgium as a refugee. And still working with different organizations. Let me say shortly about Engage. This is the journalists supporting exiled journalists in Belgium. We are from 24 countries, and more or less like 100 journalists that they are working. And we have an online magazine called that Media Latitude, and the journalists in exile that they write their story. So this is a small project, but at least I'm super happy that as a journalist, we have the chance to write and keep our identity. And also, I work for the Brussels Morning, that's also run by an exiled journalist, and it's really super good. So it's really a pleasure to be and talk about that. So as a journalist, the state of press freedom in 2025 has directly shaped my work, or how I work. Balance journalism and personal risk, especially in environment is on risk. It's always make so difficult to think about that and do something for that. And mostly I'm using anonymous sources, and also I need to keep secret my sources to work for that and going in that direction. To be a journalist and work in a zone war country, it is completely difficult and different. Even I'm living in Belgium, but sometimes I think for my family and relatives that they are living on that. So it's always changing something. And press freedom, it's really good, but as my colleague said, now I'm a little bit like not sure the real press freedom exists all over the world. Even in Europe, there is always some restriction to work on that and see, okay, press freedom exists. Maybe there is another question, but I will talk about press freedom later. Thank you.
So I will go directly answering your question. I will just give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Mustafa Darwish. I'm an independent journalist based in Ireland, and I fled from Egypt back in 2019. I'm a very close friend with Ahmed. We used to publish on the same, on similar platforms. I mainly lately was covering about immigration, etc., etc. What motivated me in 2019 and 2025, still after 14 years in this industry, to keep fighting and covering that unfortunately not a lot, but the majority of outlets in the world, if not owned by governments, which is supposed to be public, like funded by the taxpayers in every country, or owned by political parties or specific businessmen or specific countries that there is a lot of concerns around it, like Emirates, which has started to own a lot of media platforms, even in my country. So what motivates me that many of those, the majority of those outlets are with agenda, and there is always restrictions on publishing specific stories. This is aligning with our, they call it editorial guideline, but it is, what behind that is it aligning with our agenda or no, you know? So this is what keeps me working so far after like my 20s and a half, 30s.
Thank you guys for those questions, for those answers. I was wondering if you guys could tell me how you deal with those restrictions and kind of how the types of stories you tell have changed as press restrictions have been amplified.
Like, first of all, when I started to stay here in Belgium, I decided to do that, to say that I'm not a victim. I'm not letting anyone to treat me as a victim. I'm a journalist. I'm a professional journalist. I don't need any traineeship from anyone. I can't train many. So, and I was just struggling to prove that, because, you know, at the very beginning I was here to find funding for our platform, and all the donors were, they were okay to support us as long as we are in Egypt. But when you be exiled, you cannot come back to home. So no, you are not journalists. We will not train you. We will not integrate you. We would support you, give them some money, but it doesn't work like that. So, and actually, it was struggling at the very beginning. So, I was working as a delivery man. I was delivering food. So, and I was in the same time working for some platforms like Middle East Eye, Al Jazeera, which they really pay well. So, like for example, Middle East Eye, they were paying 450 euros per article, which was, for me, wow, that's very good. So if I just write 4 articles like every month, I can have some money with the delivery work. And then we started our platform through this. So I was just working, paying my rent, and dealing with our platform. And the same with our journalists in Egypt. They were doing their work and supporting our platform. And then when first investigation that says that we can work even if we are exiled, it was investigation about the war in Gaza, about that Palestinians pay money to cross to Rafah to be safe. And then Guardian started to contact us. Guys, we want some information. Can you help us? And we were still so small platform. It started from here, actually, and the donors started to believe in us. So now you can exist. We'll give you money. Come here. You are a village journalist. So it's really, you know, it's just fighting as the same as you were fighting in your country for freedom of press. You were fighting to work. You were fighting to say that we have different narrative. It's not actually that the official narrative, it's not always honest narrative. So we have alternative media. So yeah, we should just fight. We don't have to believe that we are victims to continue our work here. And that's how it goes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. As a journalist, I think I have definitely seen a different in the types of stories being told, depending from where you are working. From my experience in Afghanistan as a journalist, there is always some restriction. Sometimes the topics and the stories unpublished, untold, because of the freedom of expression or press freedom is not exist correctly. Even I'm talking from 20 years ago. But to work as a journalist in the European countries, also it's not easy. So I see the difference. And in Afghanistan, mostly you do like a self-censor because of your family and you. So in Europe, it's not the case, but sometimes it is put you in the way to think, okay, if you are talking about the religious leaders, or maybe the king families, or like the LGBTQ, I mean, 5 or 10 years ago, it was so difficult to talk about that. But slowly everything changed. And in these two both contents, as a journalist being in Afghanistan, in his own country, and also in Europe, to compromise, sometimes it's so difficult and different. But for me, I always keep talking, asking the question, and reporting. Doesn't matter how much reflect on me and with the critical narrative that we can make it as a journalist. So if we keep like a balance, sometimes it put you in a way that you think, okay, this is good to report or not. Also, it's like a self-censor again. And to work freely, also with the press freedom and also with the restriction of the liberty or the media outlets, sometimes it's not easy. In Europe or any other countries, the biggest media is buy or bought with the, let's say, with the millionaires, and they have their own restriction and rules that you should cover. Then that's exist.
Okay, I'm gonna give an example answer. It might be a bit long example about how I overcame restrictions. Back in 2019, I was a student at the University of Limerick, and I was asylum seeker in Ireland. I had no right to work, no permission to work, and as similar to Ahmed's start, I was working with some restaurants, some cash in hand, etc., etc., and publishing, trying to get some reports published on Euronews, Middle East Eye, and there was a specific story that I know like Ireland was not publishing about that at all, about suicide among asylum seekers community. And I spent 16 months working on that, and I literally contacted every single outlet in Ireland, and I meant it. I wanted to publish it in Ireland because the majority of readers, they read mainly the national newspapers rather than international, like Middle East Eye or Euronews. They don't follow that that much as they follow the Irish news outlets. So I wanted more people to read it, to make more impact on the government, to release data in the future. So through my work with Euronews and Middle East Eye as a freelancer, which were assignments for the university back then, I luckily won a student journalist of the year 2 times in a row. Then, okay, like I got email back that I sent 7 months ago and nobody replied to me, congratulations, do you still have this piece about suicide in direct provision? Like nobody wanted to publish that, and eventually it got investigative report of the year among seniors in Ireland. So I really was pushing so hard to overcome this restriction. I know some outlets have these restrictions because of the Ireland history with the Catholic Church about shaming suicide as suicide. But eventually it got published and it made impact. The Department of Justice released a statement later that on yearly basis they gonna publish that about suicide and deaths among asylum seekers. So that was it.
Thank you so much. Have you seen increased sensitivity around the topics that you cover? Any new forms of censorship or control that you've noticed?
Yes, of course. I mean, we are from Egypt, so I mean, I was trying to publish a story about, we have something called national security in Egypt, which is not official security. It's just, people were like us, but they control. I believe that they control the world, so they control Egypt. So I was trying to publish a story about this national security with the most, brief platforms in Egypt, which called Madamas and Al-Manassa. And they were afraid actually to publish this story because it has a lot of details that they say it's sensitive details. But then it was the idea of start our platform because, we have the space here. No one will follow us here. I hope so. So it started, the project started for me. We have many sensitive stories you cannot publish about them, like the economy of army, the president, the situation of politics. So you cannot write about anything. It's really difficult. And that's why, I'm not saying that we are perfect journalists. We are journalists. But because we don't have this red line in our platform, people started to follow us in Egypt. We are now, as a platform, one of the most important platforms, I think, in Egypt. And that's why they blocked us. They blocked our website because people started to say, this is really serious narrative. We should follow this journalists because we don't have this kind of journalism in Egypt. We don't have something called investigative journalism. So it's really, and I mean, if we are lucky that we can publish some stories, but our colleagues in Egypt, every day when they publish stories, they think about it 100 times. So it's, yeah.
Or not getting bylined, not getting their names published as journalists, which is like the most fundamental right for journalists to get their names published with their work. Sorry about that.
That's good, yeah. When Jamal is talking about Egypt, I think about Afghanistan. I said, yes, it exists everywhere, even in Europe, if I can say it. There's always sensitive topics. For example, from side of Afghanistan, years ago, I wrote an article about Bachabazi. It means dancing by. A young boy that wearing the clothes of women or girls and dancing in front of the eldest. And it keeps like the people, they are a little bit rich and they have this person, I said, as a slave. 24 hours with that guy paid for them during the night, bring them in the bed. So we call that bachabazi, and it's very sensitive. Years ago in Afghanistan, I started writing about that, and I received threat. I stopped. But when I left Afghanistan, for sure, there was many stories that published about that. In Belgium also, I started working on that, and it was one of my subjects at the university that in Belgium at the ULB. I wrote about that. And my professor was super excited, let's say, and said that I never heard about that. I said, yeah, because it's something that you cannot find it in the online media, but it exists. And when I wrote that, I found it still exists in Belgium between the guys, the refugees that in the center. And I received threat from the person that they are living here. But it's very good that police, federal police of Belgium contact me and say that we are searching and working for a topic like that because we have some difficulties in the center here in Belgium. Could you help us? And then I went, like I gave a seminar for the police and said, how does it work? And why they are not giving a report, because it's a taboo and no one is accepting. But if you go in that direction, they are talking about that. That's really sensitive, and it's not easy to talk about that. And sometimes this kind of topic puts you in the way that you do censor yourself, and it's not easy, but I hope one day as a free journalist, without thinking for anything, and we are free to cover everything that we want.
About sensitivity, I remember there was one of the latest stories that I was working on in Egypt. It was about the deportation campaign by the Egyptian regime on Chinese Muslim community when they made under table deal with China to deport some students to China who were studying at Al-Azhar University. I managed to interview someone who has dual citizens. So he was not deported. His other citizenship, secured him of not getting deported. And you want to secure your resource. You don't want any harm for them. And he was anonymous, and his video was anonymous. I changed his voice, his tone, and still after 7 months, the national security managed to analyze the video and reach it out to the guy. And in that time, I was not in Egypt, and he contacted me, and but like thankfully he was not arrested. It was kind of just alert, like they were just warning him, but they brought him to the national security, and he stayed with them for 4 hours, and that was it. Nowadays, I'm covering a story in Ireland that Emirates is trying to control some Islamic centers and get the data of the Muslims and parents of the Quranic schools. And then I found out some parents fled from Sudan and Emirates, and they have sentenced to prison like for life or for 25 years by Emirates itself. So I understood why. And some of them is not like never fled or anything, but they are worried about their jobs because they work for Google, for Facebook, etc., etc. So such things is so sensitive. Like you don't know even like if this interview will be analyzed somehow. They're gonna reach out to this person. They would be harmed through their jobs, through their like home address, etc., etc. So it is a bit complicated, but you try to learn from mistakes and past mistakes to not get anyone harmed and get the story published eventually.
Thank you. And now I was wondering if you could kind of explain how you balance that personal risk for yourself and how you choose to tell these stories, as well as the subjects, how you balance the risk that they're like put in when you choose to cover their story.
So you mean how can I keep myself safe?
Yes.
Well, it's an interesting question because as I told you before, they arrested my father because I'm working. So, you know, you are trying to balance, you are trying to have a partnership with, like, I don't know, like human rights organization that can advocate for your right when you be arrested. You are trying to have, like, for me as a journalist, for example, have a very good relation with the Egyptian journalistic syndicate in Egypt in order if our colleagues wanted to jail, like I just contact them and say, guys, you should just protect them, you should do something. We learn how to advocate for our rights, to advocate for freedom of press. We learn how to make the government of Egypt, if they arrest some of us, they would pay for it, and they would be like, you know, they would destroy their names in front of the world because they are trying to say that we are a democratic country. So if you are a democratic country, how you arrest journalists? So, and other thing, like when I contact my colleagues in Egypt, we are not contacting through WhatsApp or Facebook or this application. For example, we use Signal, which is very safe application. We have VPN, which is a tool that if the national security wanna follow you, they cannot follow you through this VPN. It's very important for everyone in Egypt to have this VPN, and it should be a secure VPN. So it's not just you go Google and download application like VPN application. No, you should have such a partnership with, for example, international media support organization or crime function, which is support security of journalists, and you should have a partnership with, network of investigative journalists around the world. It's all of these things are very important. Plus, actually, when we write information about sensitive issues, we are very, very careful. We don't mention anything without fact checking. In order, if we wanted to jail or something, we can defend ourselves legally in front of the court.
Thank you. To make balance in yourself as a journalist, so I think it's depending from where you can report it, and because in some place the freedom is very restricted, and it puts you in danger, and it's always challenging. And not easy to keep like a balance as a journalist, and also not thinking for the risk that it's in front of you. So it's more difficult to take decision. Should I think for my safety and take the risk, or should I report it correctly? It's not easy decision, but sometimes as a journalist, we must accept the risk to report it correctly and do our best. As my experience, not long time ago, in 2021, after the collapse of Afghanistan, 2 days later, there was a press conference by NATO Secretary General here in Belgium. And I was in that conference, and I asked a question about the work that international community, especially NATO, did in Afghanistan. And I said, what does it mean 20 years being involved in Afghanistan, spending money and billions of dollars, and also hundreds of international troops were killed in Afghanistan. And so you are replacing Taliban by Taliban. What does it mean? And as a woman, who can make guarantee we can work freely or be involved in the country? Because I know it. The Taliban, the first time, took power. We saw it. And I said, it will be a mistake, and don't recognize the Taliban. 2 days later, 2 members of my family was arrested by Taliban. And they were beaten, and they were in a jail. And my mother said in the telephone on that time, they were in Afghanistan, and said, my daughter, please stop talking like that, and they will kill us. I said, Mom, now it's so late. Everything that happened, I apologize, but I never quiet and silence to see not only my family, the people of Afghanistan is sacrificed because of the mistake that United States did with the terrorist group. If not now, then tomorrow will be late. I said, apologize, Mom. I will never accept. So I will do to keep our country free. And I'm a journalist. I said to my mother, you know that. And she said that you always put us in danger. So I said, that's the life. My brother is a doctor. He is helping the people, and I put you in the dangerous. And she was crying, and I said, sorry, Mom, it's my job. And I have like a responsibility to do for that. So if safety and protection were guaranteed for the journalist, it's more easy. But this is not the case, especially to be a journalist from a country always war. I was born with the war and grew up, and still I see war. I never seen peace in my country. So as a journalist, to be in that area to work, as my colleague said, it's always a risk. And keep the balance is not easy, but we don't have sometimes no chance.
I will not comment much on that since I'm on the same page with Ziada in so many different things. So I will let you go ahead with the next question.
Before that, I wanted to also give the stage to the audience in case there's a question from the public that you'd like to ask. We can provide anyone with a microphone. We also have other students who have questions. I'm going to, maybe last question on your guys' behalf. Yeah. Okay, perfect. In that case, is there a question from the audience that people would like to give to our amazing panel? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to project my voice. One thing you haven't talked about is how money and the economics of journalism is one way of stopping journalists from reporting. I'm really interested in understanding how, as journalists in exile, how are you making the money work? And it's a topic often none of us want to talk about. But I think that around the world, journalism is under attack by the business model being under attack. So that's my question.
Well, I'm talking about me and my platform. Okay, it's kind of, for me, I go to the donor and they say that if you don't support me, you don't have any real information about Egypt, which is a risk for you. So it's, and they are afraid of, cutting the information about Egypt. That's why, for example, the EU are very interested in supporting such a platform. So I know that I'm not taking money for just putting in my pocket. No, it's money for my work. And I believe in that, and the information should be for everyone. So that's why we are publishing in Arabic and English as well. So, you know, it's kind of deal between you and between the donor. So, and I think it works like that. But if you just go there and you believe that it's just you want to take money because you continue to work, no one will give you money. That's the truth. Yes. So no one will give you money because you're a journalist. You're a journalist, and what are you doing for us? And so I know it's kind of, you know, some people may think that, okay, you are taking money from the EU, so they are controlling your lines or your platform, but no, it's just I'm choosing the donors and the people who cannot control our work. So it's really, for me, it works right now. Maybe I'm lucky because I know some colleagues, they didn't continue their work because of the money, because it's when they just go out of homes, it's, you know, they don't have any information. But for me, I'm lucky because I had a network, a very big network in Egypt before leaving Egypt. So, and this network somehow supported the idea of establishing a new platform that Egypt really needs and EU needs this platform. That's how it goes.
For me, it's like 12 years that I'm living in Belgium, and I was the first journalist that from Afghanistan to work and based in Brussels. I had always opportunity to attend in the European conferences and NATO and all this kind of things, and I received money like my salary that I work with the media in Afghanistan. And on that time, it was okay. It's not too much, but my husband works, so I can make like a balance on that. And after the collapse of Afghanistan, it's completely different because more than 230 media outlets in Afghanistan was shut down by Taliban. And I lost a lot to work as a journalist in Afghanistan. But in the same time, I start working with Brussels Morning, one of the, let's say, journal and magazine in Belgium. I'm sorry to say that I'm Belgian for the moment, but my writing in French is catastrophic. So that's why I'm writing in English. And also with the media latitude this platform gave for the journalists in exile, we are writing and they are paying. For me, in my work, there is no donor, only for my work. If I write, they pay me. If not, so there is no money. But we can balance everything and we can manage it, how to be involved. So I would say if there is any companies or donor that's supporting media in exile as a journalist like us, it will be great to work on that platform and be more free to write and continue as a journalist and work on that.
For me, luckily, I still get some publications to publish my stuff, which I get paid for that. But I'm not relying financially since last year. I was full-time with some Irish news outlets, and I managed to get some funds from European Union for some projects I worked on. But since last year, I do other stuff, and journalism, I wanted to do whatever I want, so I do it on freelance basis. And I'm planning to start next year a news outlet that is covering Ireland visually, which I'm good at. So this is the situation with me.
Any more questions?
Bonjour, good day. Thank you for the conference. Serhiy Kasyanov, Professional Government Association of Ukraine. I would like to ask a somewhat rhetorical question. because free world ha- has war, not only hot war like in Ukraine or a war in public domain, but there is also hybrid war in the media space. And we know that anti-democratic forces, they win this war in the social network space like TikTok and others. So my question: how to cope? How to win this war for us, for democratic forces? How to defeat enemies in this media space, in this network space, in the fight for votes of the voters? Should be information distribution more restricted, checked, or on the contrary, our point of view, our values should be delivered more thoroughly? So this, I understand this difficult question, but I would like to listen to your thoughts.
Yeah,
Thank you.
needs studying. Well, can I go? No.
Yeah.
Well, it's I think to be part of this war, it's just you may send a message for people to say that your stories are very important for us. Your real stories are very important. We are not using your stories for just making money, or we don't have agenda. That's a very important point because propaganda doesn't continue forever. Like, people will find out that the governments were lying. They will not believe you forever because, for example, if let's say that the situation is very, very good in Egypt, but people are living in this situation. How can you say that every day and make people trust you as a government? So it's kind of, I want to say that simply, it's just you are doing your real work. You're not following agenda to be part, to fight against this propaganda that came from Russia or even United States, or I don't know, like China. It's just simply your work, but work for loving your work, not for just looking for money, not for supporting agenda. And yeah, just be with people on the ground. That's it for me.
The question is so narrow, let's say. If we talk about that, it takes so long, especially for the moment, because the young generation and the social media is impacting a lot. It's not easy to control everything. There is always, from both sides, more propaganda. The things that we can make it to trust the people is always sharing the truth, the stories. People should report it in their social media from the ground, from the place that they are living, and then telling the stories and always publishing this kind of things that maybe can help. Otherwise, for the moment, the digital networks are so complicated to control. There is always propaganda from every side. We cannot control them, but the things that we can, we always talked with the people, with the government, and share the reality and the truth, and bring the topics. Sometimes it's not coming in the real media that can maybe help the people that they understand this is the reality and they should accept and support. So there is like a people, let's say like TikTokers or I don't know, YouTubers and this kind of people, they are doing for their own personal business to receive some money. So that should be controlled by the person they are reaching or having this kind of network, and they should control, and then they should delete it, this kind of propaganda. Doesn't matter from which country, from which side, and from which group.
because this question is very important, and you know, I know, yeah, it's good to tell people the stories and the right and what happens on the ground, but you know, as you know, that algorithm that controls the world now. Elon Musk now with Twitter and Facebook. So it's kind of, as journalists, we should think out of the box, and will we just forever being controlled by this algorithm, like, and this filter, for example, when you write about Gaza now, it's just filtering your posts, so it doesn't show, like no one will read. So, and actually now in our platform, because of that, we are thinking about, not thinking, we are starting now to develop another application, but it's not social media, it's for the platform of our investigative platform. And it's not just publishing the stories or the articles. We are now trying to find out how we can put these people in our application and not leaving like fast, like just stay in our application and read some article news about what's happening. But we should just find our way to not be controlled of this algorithm. We should be out of social media, to be honest. Like social media is controlling our life, so it's kind of simply we should come back to, like, you know, before Facebook and Twitter, but digital. So we should have our platforms like application, or you know, because you know, if you write a story now and publish it on social media, you don't do anything. So yeah.
Adding to my colleagues also, I believe that there should be a lot of pressure on social media networks like Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, because like it is clear, we understand that they want to make as much money as possible, the owners of those companies. But we should make pressure on them to hire fact-checking teams. I remember a few years ago, Facebook had partnership with Agence de France Presse to hire their fact-checking team on some media projects for Facebook to check the facts of some projects that being published on Facebook and some digital stuffs like videos, photos, etc. But meanwhile, this is too little, and even this partnership didn't continue. I know I know many people who are working for TikTok and Facebook. They are all content review, and there is a specific policy, nothing related to misinformation, nothing related to news at all. There is no review on that. A lot of people just spreading lies and misinformation about many topics, about what's going on in Ukraine, in Gaza, etc., etc. I assure you that there is no single Ukrainian, there is no single Palestinian are working in, for example, CPL, which is contracted by Meta in Dublin to review the content in Middle East and many other countries. So they hire people from different languages. I know people from Egypt, from Morocco. There is no single. I know people from Belarus. There is no Russian-speaking person from Ukraine to review the content, for example, which is like a bit awkward. And before they hire someone, they have to check their Facebook account. That happened to many of my friends before they get hired. They have to double check their political agenda, which is like I'm not sure about the legality of that, but I believe it is personal data. You can't ask for it before you hire someone. So I went a bit far from your question, but it is related somehow. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. With that, we'll have a 2-minute break, and then we'll have our other members join the panels, such as Toon Vos from the Journalistic Voices Diversified Project, Rob Harkers, who's made it from Amsterdam for RFG Media, and Professor Christopher Chavez, who will be joining our panel members, who will have a little break after the conversation. Thank you so much. Good job. Ton Vos from Journalistic Voices Diversified, Luke Steinberg from the Media Diversity Institute, Rob Harkers from RFG Media, and Professor Chris Chavez. Any seat would do. And then I would also like to call upon the exiled reporters that were just on the panel, if they're available, to join us for this collaborative conversation, and as well as our reporters, Tarek, Anthony, and of course, Sydney Seymour.
Hello.
Are we missing someone?
Hi, hello, hi everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here, and thank you to our last panel. It was really awesome to hear everything that you guys had to share, and really important work you are all doing, so thank you. We have a few representatives from different media groups today, and I think that's it. Maybe we will be joined by the exiled journalists as well. But I think I'm gonna go down and have everyone introduce themselves, and I'll just pass down this mic.
Thank you. So I'm Luke Steinberg from the Media Diversity Institute Global, which is based here in Brussels. So we work on enhancing representation, a fair and accurate representation of underrepresented groups or marginalized groups in the media. So yeah, it's all about media diversity and inclusion. We have an office in London and an office here and an office in Serbia.
I'm Rob Hartgers. I am a journalist and project manager for RFG Media. We are an NGO, an organization that supports and works with exiled journalists in the Netherlands. We're based in Amsterdam. I'll tell you a bit more about RFG and what we do later on. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Toon, from the Netherlands, living in Brussels. Work as a freelancer, do a lot of data visualization, but I used to work with an organization called Our Europe, is where we did the Journalistic Voices project with Ahmed, who we just had the pleasure to hear from. That was a couple years ago, and now, freelance, like I mentioned.
I'm Chris Chavez. I'm a media studies professor at the School of Journalism and Communication. I also have the opportunity to work with a lot of our doctoral students who are journalists from the Global South who are working on their dissertations around issues of representation. Thank you.
Great, thank you guys. So our first question is, why did each of you want to be here today, and why are these kinds of collaborative events important, especially now? Maybe Chris, you can start and then pass the mic back down, if that works.
Yeah, this is something we've been going to for the past 15 years, heading to World Press Freedom Day, just to see the interesting collaborations between journalists, academic, policymakers, people that are really interested in the issue of press freedom globally. So it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to just sort of do our part to generate some attention around this issue and to build collaborations for the future.
Well, of course, it is a very important topic, but I think for us, since our project ended a couple of years ago, it was also a nice opportunity to see each other again. People doing different stuff. Unfortunately, not everybody could be here, but yeah, connecting, reconnecting to the network is quite important.
Well, for us, for RFG, press freedom is a very important issue. In a world with perfect press freedom, we wouldn't be necessary. I mean, the 200 journalists in our network are all people who were forced to flee their home country because they were threatened, or they weren't able to do their jobs. And also, I know that we are the only organization that works with exiled journalists in the Netherlands, but I know that there are other organizations similar to us in other countries, so I think it will be good to connect with like-minded organizations. So I hope to meet some people here.
Yeah, I'm here because Media Diversity Institute has been working for many years with migrant journalists, and we have a lot of different projects focused on migration and journalism and how migrants are represented in the media. But I'm also here to plug a project that we are currently working on called Migra Voice, which is coordinated by Maldita in Spain, in Madrid. It's a project that is focused on increasing or enhancing the voices of migrant experts and linking them together with journalists who want to enhance the representation of migrants in the media, in European media especially. So yeah, we have a platform for this, and which I'll talk about a little bit. This is the QR code for the platform. So it's an online platform. It's like a CRM, like customer relationship type of platform. So you can log on and basically create an account as an expert, so a migrant expert on any, you could be an expert on any topic. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a PhD or anything like this. And then journalists can also create their accounts, and then we foster kind of collaborations between journalists and migrant experts. And this way we kind of enhance the voices of, promote the voices of migrant experts in the European media, who are often overlooked when journalists are looking for sources or experts to speak to when they're developing their stories. So that's the platform there, which you can create an account on if you're interested, either as a journalist or an expert.
Thank you. So this year's theme for World Press Freedom Day is AI, and so I'm curious how your different organizations and work is being impacted both negatively and positively by AI, and how you are using it in your work, if you want to start.
Yeah, how is AI? Maybe you guys go first.
Well, it's impacted our work both positively and negatively, I'd say. Positively because we publish in Dutch, sometimes in English, and we work with journalists who are not fluent, often in either of those languages. So AI is a brilliant tool for translation if used sensibly. That is something that we continue to learn how to best use AI for translation, so it does not become something that does more than translating your text, let's say. AI has also impacted our work negatively, and that's some of the investigations, because we also do investigative stories, are about misinformation, fake news, doctored photos. So we're seeing a whole flood of these things. We just finished, there's a story forthcoming that we did, an investigative story into Taliban propaganda in Europe, people spreading pro-Taliban narratives on social media in Europe. And of course there we're also seeing a lot of AI-generated fake photos and things like that. So
yeah, it's a powerful tool, and like any powerful tool, it can be used for a lot of different things, some good, some bad. I have enjoyed using, as a freelancer, using AI as a sparring partner. Being alone in a room, it's quite nice to get somebody else's opinion on what you're doing. Now, the risk, of course, is that since it's a good brain, it's quite good at brainstorming, it's quite good at giving feedback. it can do a lot of the, let's say, the non-productive thinking. So before you write, you think about what you want to say and how you want to say it and what is important. And you go to the painful process that is storytelling. Those steps are easily done with the help of AI, but by not going through the painful process, the outcome suffers. Also, in terms of social media, I read something interesting recently on LinkedIn. Somebody said many posts written by AI were faster made than they were to consume, and that's of course quite a worrying trend. We talk more and more about content as I think of content as something to fill something up, right? You have a post, oh, it needs text. Okay, there you go. There is a lot to be lost there. It's also a practical tool, so we have to figure out the balance. And if that was easy, the theme wouldn't be AI this year.
As a university, I think it's moving so much more quickly than we could probably manage it. So I think we're in the process of trying to figure out what it means. I think we recognize that it's here. How it's impacting different disciplines in different kinds of ways, I think is something that we're struggling with. So for example, in journalism, it brings up the issue of authenticity, who has ownership of voice. I think it also impacts our creative industries. So advertising, for example, is now relying more and more on AI-generated campaigns, AI-generated creative, which is raising, again, some interesting ethical issues. But there's also some economic implications for this as more and more brands are turning to AI-generated content to replace copywriters and art directors. And so it's a slippery slope that I think we're still trying to figure out.
For us, it's probably not affecting us that much, but for sure the publishers we work with are often having their content mined by large language models without any compensation in return for that. So I think there's still some copyright issues to sort out there. The other thing is there's a lot of AI auditing going on around the kind of output it makes, which can often exacerbate stereotypes or negative stereotypes or bias. So I think there needs to be more of that auditing and then advocacy around what kind of data goes in and what gets put out, and more transparency and accountability for these companies, which is probably not going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately.
Great, thank you all. And could you each tell us a bit more about, you mentioned MicroVoice, but what are the current or emerging collaborations and initiatives that are working to protect journalists and foster press freedom?
Well, as I mentioned, our project was a couple years ago, but maybe I can say something about that because it was quite interesting, and unfortunately it didn't continue due to external reasons. But what was cool about, I think, the Journalistic Voices project is I'm still quite young, but I was a young journalist being in one of the partner organizations from our Europe, working on a project with exiled journalists who, some of them, one of them had more experience than I was alive almost. So what was fascinating for all of us and for me as someone who was lucky enough to work on it was that with the 4 journalists we collaborated with, we had so much experience in the room, yet the doors to Belgian Dutch media were well, quite closed, which remained an issue. And rather than making a program that said, okay, this is how to become a journalist over here, out here, the first question was, okay, what do you need? How can we facilitate? How can we use the time and money that we have for you to get the things that you need? And they were things that we probably wouldn't have thought about. Of course, networking is a big part, but then we got some professional photos. There was a lot of interest in podcasting, so we got Jair Stein, a podcaster from the Netherlands to do a day-long workshop. So that was all quite interesting. It was also interesting to be invited with the group to, I forgot where it was in the Netherlands, True Stories, a journalism festival about narrative journalism. And it's always clear how important people think it is. And then not much happens. So those are a couple observations from that experience. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to work much on it since, so it's nice to be able to speak on it here.
Yeah, when it comes to press freedom, Reporters Sans Frontières has just published its yearly Press Freedom Index, and I saw that the Netherlands moved up one place, is now in third or fourth. But I would say that for the journalists that we work with, exiled journalists, the situation has deteriorated over the past year and the years before that. I think that's and that's from what I am seeing and observing. First of all, because there are more threats from foreign states who persecute journalists outside of their borders. So even when people are living in the Netherlands or other European countries, they are being persecuted by the countries that they fled from. In the past, that was often Iran, which is very active in this. I mean, we know that they even had 2 people murdered in the Netherlands, dissidents. But now it's not just Iran; it's also other countries, Afghanistan, Yemen, Turkey. So this is, of course, a very serious problem for exiled journalists, and it's not just people who are being targeted here, but they are being told or being warned, if you publish this, then we will get your family, because there's usually family left behind in Kabul or in Yemen or and this is getting worse, is my feeling. Only 2 weeks ago, we had a journalist from DRC, from Congo, living in an asylum reception center in AZC in the Netherlands, who received a very serious threat, who now is living under protection in a hotel in the Netherlands. So this is one problem for exiled journalists. The other is that we unfortunately have a far-right government in the Netherlands that is targeting or has won the elections with the promise of curbing migration, especially asylum migration. This also affects refugee journalists, because if you, for instance, the asylum process for Syrians is now frozen. It's much more difficult for people from Yemen to get asylum. And if you are a journalist and you are in exile and you are not certain whether you're allowed to stay or have to go back, or maybe policies will change and you are going to be sent back, then you will be much more careful with what you write and say. So this has also negatively impacted the freedom of exiled journalists. The way we try, one of the things that we do is, if people in our network receive threats or are in danger, we of course try to help. We work together with an organization called Persveilig in the Netherlands, Safe Press. It's a joint organization of the Dutch Journalist Union and the National Police, which means that if you are a journalist and you receive threats, then this is escalated to a higher threat level by the police. I mean, that's how it should go, though it doesn't always work like that, unfortunately. But that's an important organization, an important partner for us when people are threatened in our network. In general, we try to work with as many partner organizations as possible to make sure that the journalists in our network can fall back on legal support, on other types of support if they are in trouble. So that's, yeah.
So the platform, the MigraVoice platform, is where we log the collaborations, and then we then go on to promote those collaborations. We also have been doing videos with the experts and journalists and promoting those through our social media channels. And then one of the other things we did at the very start of the project was in Berlin. We invited 15 migrant journalists to come and work for a few days, I think a week, on a kind of boot camp where we went through different topics and worked on narrative journalism, inclusive interviewing, different techniques and things. So this was really great for helping them to bounce ideas off each other, to collaborate. And then what became of that was this, the MigraVoice book. So this has 15 stories from the 15 journalists that worked throughout the boot camp, and then spent quite a long time developing their stories with help from Are We Europe, actually, and Are We Europe also published and designed the book. It's very good quality journalism in this book, so yeah, I encourage you to check it out. There's another, that's the other QR code with the link to the book in case you want to check it out. Unfortunately, I don't have any more hard copies with me, but yeah, that's how we're sort of working on collaborations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. There's one more question that was asked on the live stream, which I think is very relevant, of course, for the location of this conference, which is, what is the best way for exiled reporters and journalists to work together in Brussels? What are the spaces where people can find each other and be able to collaborate, which is obviously the biggest theme of today's conference?
I know of one space, which is the Maison du Media Lab, which was run by, actually it's the former owner of Euractiv, is Christophe Leclerc. His and his wife's house, he and Sharon, they gave up their house for exiled journalists to live in. So there are journalists there from Ukraine and I think Georgia, Moldova, Belarus. And I was there, I think last month or something, cooking borscht with the Ukrainian ambassador to the EU. And so this is one space where they all get to live together and collaborate and help develop their stories as well.
So, before this building collapses, which could be a metaphor for many things that we've covered in... There's a ground floor, we're fine. Okay, it's just the ground floor. No, but in all seriousness, this conference and this meeting should be reflecting the greater themes and hopes of what journalism should achieve in this year, which is intercontinental, interdisciplinary collaboration. And most of all, what we're really trying to do is highlight those at the front lines of the conflicts that we're watching, many of us from our screens, which are exiled journalists and reporters. So I hope that all of you were able to feel more hopeful from this conference, understand that we are trying our best, and that it's because of institutes and organizations like these. Once again, I must thank the Ukrainian Voices Refugee Committee, MigraVoice, Journalistic Voices Diversified, RFG Media, and of course the Crossing Institute, for all of your hard work and engage, of course, and for this conversation. We'll have many more after this, but for that, I will conclude the conference. Thank you all so much for attending. It's a great pleasure.